Most zombie apocalypses want you to feel hopeless. Dead Rising hands you a shopping mall, a roll of duct tape, and says, figure it out. But underneath the lawnmower helmets and wine bottle weapons is one of the darkest government conspiracies in gaming, and nobody talks about it. So let's fix that, starting with the outbreak that kicked everything off. Dead Rising. Here's the thing about the Willamette Parkview Mall outbreak. It lasted 3 days, September 19th to September 22nd, 2006. The entire zombie apocalypse was contained to a single town in Colorado and stopped by the National Guard putting up a fence, which is, not exactly the end of the world, but the way it started is genuinely horrifying. A man named Carlito Keys walked into that mall and released parasitic insect larvae called Ampulex compressa giganteus directly into the ventilation system. Not a virus, not a fungal spore, actual parasitic wasps, genetically engineered to target humans. The larvae invade a living host, consume them from the inside out over hours, and then burst from the corpse to find new hosts. So imagine a wasp nest, except the nest is a person, and the wasps are the size of your thumb. And Carlito didn't do this because he was insane. He did it because the US government did it first. Years before Willamette, the American military deployed the exact same parasitic insects in a small Central American town called Santa Cabeza. Wiped the place off the map. Carlito survived, and the mall attack was his revenge. Bioterrorism as payback for bioterrorism. The zombies themselves are a walking contradiction. Incredibly fragile. You can kill them with a mannequin leg, a cash register, literally a handbag, but in groups, they overwhelm barricades, break through reinforced doors, and drag down armed survivors through sheer numbers. The population of Willamette was 53,594 people. Every single one of them either died or turned. But here's where it gets really dark. The zombies weren't even the most dangerous thing in that mall. The psychopath survivors were consistently more lethal than any horde. A clown with chainsaws, a Vietnam veteran with a machete, a grocery store manager who decided his employees needed to die for company loyalty. The parasites turned people into shambling meat puppets, but isolation and trauma turned the living into something worse. And if you thought this was a one-time thing, Dead Rising 4 pulls back the curtain. The Willamette incident was part of a pattern of deliberate governmental bioweapon deployments. The conspiracy didn't end with Carlito. It started long before him and continued long after. 3 days. One mall, a fence. That's all it took to contain the smallest apocalypse on this list. But if you think a quarantine zone and some military checkpoints are enough to stop what comes next, Dying Light would like a word. Dying Light. Most zombie viruses spread like wildfire. This one has a built-in off switch. The Harran virus is a rabies variant pathogen that tore through the Turkish city of Harran, and it has one massive weakness that no other infection on this list shares: ultraviolet light. Direct sunlight doesn't just slow these infected down, it actively suppresses them. Survivors figured this out fast and rigged entire safe zones with UV lighting arrays, essentially building artificial daylight fortresses in the middle of a collapsing city. But here's where it gets weird. The presumed patient zero, a man named Baris Baruch, attacked 8 people in Harran's Old Town district and killed 2 of them. Direct contact, blood everywhere, and 0 secondary infections. Not one. A GRE scientist studying the case concluded the virus couldn't have originated from airborne or waterborne sources because direct physical violence produced absolutely no transmission. So where did it actually come from? Nobody knows. Which is, not ideal. What we do know is what happens after infection, and it's a progression system that would make an RPG jealous. Early stage infected, called biters, retain basic human form but lose all higher brain function. They shamble, they bite, they're manageable during daylight. Virals are the next step up, and these are genuinely unsettling because they still have memories. They can work together, coordinate attacks, and demonstrate actual teamwork. Then you hit the volatile stage, and the game changes completely. Volatiles are enormously muscular apex predators with deformed lower jaws, capable of full parkour movement across rooftops. They are fast, smart, and absolutely relentless. And then the sun goes down. Night in Harran isn't just darker. It's a fundamentally different game. Biters spontaneously collapse and reanimate as nightwalkers, more aggressive variants with enhanced speed and capabilities. The entire threat landscape transforms in real time. Daytime Harran is survivable. Nighttime Harran is a death sentence for anyone caught outside UV protection. The government tried to handle it. Hazmat response teams were deployed into the quarantine zone with full protective equipment. They got infected anyway. The gear wasn't enough. The quarantine held for a while, keeping the virus bottled up inside Heron's walls, and everyone patted themselves on the back. Problem solved. Turns out, no. Dying Light 2 reveals that government research laboratories had been quietly developing the Heron virus as a bioweapon the entire time. A second strain, the tachytransmissive Heron virus, escaped from those labs and triggered a catastrophic second wave that made the original outbreak look like a dress rehearsal. The quarantine didn't fail because it was breached. It failed because the people running it were building something worse behind closed doors. At least Heron's infected had the decency to slow down during the day. The next apocalypse on this list doesn't give you that luxury. Days Gone. Most zombie apocalypses start with some shadowy military project or a secret underground lab. Days Gone starts with a researcher who genuinely thought she was saving lives, which is, not ideal. The Freaker virus was never supposed to exist. A corporation called Nero had deep ties to the research, but the actual science started with Sarah Whitaker, a botanist studying a mutated strain of lavender in the Pacific Northwest. She was working on medical applications, legitimate, helpful medical applications. But the research got twisted behind the scenes, quietly pushed toward bioweapon territory without the person doing the actual work fully understanding what her discoveries were being shaped into. Cool. Great corporate culture. Here's where civilization ends. The virus got out, not through some dramatic containment breach or military strike. It spread through human contact at a massive public gathering, dispersing through crowds before anyone understood what was happening. Attendees carried it home through airports and cities across the country. Within weeks, the global population was devastated. Billions dead. One event. A few weeks. That's all it took. But the death toll wasn't evenly distributed. And this is the part that makes Days Gone uniquely brutal. The virus hit the very young and the very old hardest. Children and the elderly had almost no chance of surviving infection. So the survivors weren't just dealing with a pandemic. They were dealing with a world where almost no children existed and almost no elderly remained. An entire civilization stripped of its youngest and oldest generations nearly overnight. The infected who survived transformation became freakers, and they came in flavors. Newts were infected children and young adolescents, smaller and weaker, that hunted from rooftops and preferred ambush tactics, only attacking when they sensed vulnerability. Screamers would shriek the moment they spotted you, drawing every nearby freaker to your location within seconds. Breakers developed enhanced musculature so dense they could shrug off bullets. Reachers moved at terrifying speed, despite bodies that looked like they should have fallen apart 3 mutations ago. Then there are the hordes, hundreds of freakers, sometimes thousands, moving as a single organism with synchronized direction changes that suggest either pheromonal coordination or something resembling a hive mind. This isn't a group of zombies shambling toward you. This is a living tidal wave of predators operating with collective intent. Nothing else in gaming replicates that feeling of watching 500 infected pour over a hillside in unison. And here's the kicker. The secret ending reveals that the virus is still mutating. O'Brien, the Nero researcher who's been helping you the entire game, shows up with freaker eyes and tells you the infected are evolving. They're developing enhanced abilities while potentially retaining human intelligence. They're not degenerating, they're upgrading. Days Gone isn't really a story about surviving a zombie apocalypse. It's a story about watching humanity get replaced by something better adapted to inherit the Earth. But if you think a virus replacing humanity sounds bad, wait until you see what happens when a corporation does it on purpose. Resident Evil. Most zombie apocalypses start with an accident, a lab leak, a mutation nobody saw coming, a contaminated food supply. Resident Evil's apocalypse started with a business plan. The T-virus wasn't some runaway experiment. It was a product. Umbrella Corporation spent over a decade engineering it throughout the 1960s and 70s, pouring resources into creating the perfect bioweapon. The breakthrough came on January 13, 1978, when Dr. James Marcus successfully incorporated annelid genes into the progenitor virus genome, creating something new enough to earn its own name. And if that wasn't enough, Dr. William Birkin later spliced Ebola RNA into the T-virus, producing the V strain specifically designed for enhanced contagion. They weren't trying to cure anything. They were iterating on a weapon the way you'd update a software patch. Hey Bill, can you make the extinction virus spreadier? Sure thing, boss. The first domino fell in late July 1998, when the Arklay laboratory experienced containment failure, releasing the T-virus into the surrounding raccoon forest. Umbrella's response was, let's say, characteristically heartwarming. They sent in cleanup teams and tried to bury the evidence, prioritizing corporate liability over human lives. Then, when the outbreak spiraled completely out of control and consumed Raccoon City, the US government authorized a thermobaric missile strike and leveled the entire city. Problem solved, right? Turns out, no. The virus had already spread far beyond the blast radius. But here's where it stops being a disaster and starts being a crime. Umbrella didn't just fail to contain the outbreak. They actively wanted it to spread. At the Umbrella Prime testing facility, the corporation ran city destruction simulations, modeling exactly how the T-virus would tear through major population centers worldwide. Then they took those results and sold the virus to multiple nations while deliberately ensuring that storage facilities remained inadequate. They handed governments a loaded gun with a hair trigger and a broken safety, then acted surprised when it went off. This wasn't negligence. This was orchestrated genocide disguised as an accidental outbreak. The environmental damage alone was staggering. Wildlife infected with the T-virus caused entire forests to die off and bodies of water to completely desiccate, converting functioning biospheres into barren wasteland. Meanwhile, Umbrella kept iterating on their real product, bioorganic weapons. Hunters and Cerberus were animals mutated into efficient killing machines. Lickers were creatures capable of wall and ceiling traversal with zero regard for the laws of physics or basic decency. Tyrant-class humanoids combined human-level cognition with superhuman regeneration. Each BOW, more refined than the last, each one a deliberate step toward perfection. By the end of it all, humanity was nearly wiped out, billions reduced to scattered pockets of survivors clinging to whatever safe zones they could find. The real monster in Resident Evil was never the shambling corpse trying to bite your neck. It was the pharmaceutical company in a boardroom running cost-benefit analyses on human extinction. And somehow, that's still not the most unsettling outbreak we need to talk about, because at least with the T-virus, somebody was steering the ship. The next infection had no driver, no corporation, no plan, just a virus that spread so fast the entire eastern seaboard collapsed before anyone could figure out what it even was. Left 4. Dead 14 days. That's all it took. From the first confirmed case in Pennsylvania to a full continental epidemic, the green flu needed exactly 2 weeks to dismantle everything. Most zombie outbreaks give humanity a slow burn where governments scramble and mount some kind of response. The green flu didn't care about your response time. Here's the thing about the name green flu. It's a lie. The official classification labels it as a strain of influenza, which sounds manageable. People hear flu and they think chicken soup and a week off work. But the pathogen operates nothing like influenza. It behaves like rabies, a neurological agent that hijacks aggression centers and motor function while keeping the host alive and mobile. The flu designation was almost certainly a deliberate governmental cover-up designed to prevent mass panic. Call it the flu. People stay calm. Call it what it actually is. People start shooting each other at gas stations, which, to be fair, they ended up doing anyway. But the transmission model is where things get truly insidious. The green flu doesn't just spread through bites. It's airborne, and the people spreading it aren't the zombies. They're the survivors. Approximately 22% of the population carried genetic immunity factors that prevented them from turning. These carriers could walk, talk, and fight like perfectly healthy humans. They felt fine. They looked fine. But every breath they exhaled pumped the virus into the air, silently infecting anyone nearby who lacked that same genetic resistance. You could survive the apocalypse, find other survivors, build a safe house, and unknowingly kill every person you rescued just by breathing, and the mutations. 8 distinct special infected emerged, each one seemingly designed to counter a specific survival strategy. Hunters pounced from rooftops to pin isolated survivors. Smokers dragged people out of defensive positions with elongated tongue grapple mechanisms. Tanks threw chunks of concrete like baseballs, which is, not ideal. Witches sat motionless until provoked, then delivered one-hit kills. Boomers exploded on death, coating survivors in bile that attracted entire hordes. Every single mutation counters a different way humans try to stay alive. Fortify a position? Tank throws a car through it. Stay together? Boomer bile pulls a horde onto the group. Split up? Hunter picks off the loner. It reads less like random mutation and more like a designed predator toolkit. But perhaps the most damning detail is the institutional response. The military didn't just fail. They actively made things worse. Personnel received contradictory information about how the virus spread, and the graffiti covering safehouse walls tells the real story. Survivors literally argued in spray paint about whether carriers were dangerous. Carriers are immune, not infected. Written next to carriers killed my family in block letters. People debating transmission mechanics on bathroom walls while the world collapsed around them. Sound familiar? The government either couldn't figure out the truth about carriers or wouldn't tell people. Either way, immune survivors kept traveling, kept breathing, kept spreading the virus to every safe zone they entered. The very act of seeking safety guaranteed the destruction of safety. 14 days from patient zero to continental collapse, and the people who survived were the ones making it worse. But if you think a 2-week timeline is fast, wait until you hear about a fungal infection that ended civilization in a single day. The Last of Us. Most zombie apocalypses ask you to suspend your disbelief. The Last of Us barely has to, because the thing that destroyed humanity in this game actually exists. Cordyceps is a real parasitic fungus. Right now, it's hijacking the brains of ants, forcing them to climb to specific heights on plants, locking their jaws into leaves, and then erupting out of their skulls to spread spores. That's not science fiction. That's a nature documentary. The fictional version just asked one question. What if it jumped to humans? The cordyceps brain infection originated from contaminated crops in South America. Mutated fungal strains entered the global food supply through infected agricultural products. And by the time anyone noticed, it was already too late. On September 26, 2013, Outbreak Day, hospitals across the United States reported a 300% spike in admissions. The FDA scrambled to issue massive crop recalls. But recalling flour doesn't help when millions of people already ate breakfast that morning. The real-world Ophiocordyceps unilateralis took millions of years of evolution to manipulate ant behavior. The fictional variant compressed that same level of advancement into weeks. It went from infecting crops to hijacking human motor function in less time than it takes most people to finish a Netflix series. And the infection doesn't just kill you, it dissolves you, stage by stage. Runners are the freshest infected, still recognizably human, still fast, still screaming. Stalkers come next, capable of going dormant on walls for ambush hunting, which is, not ideal. Clickers have been infected long enough that fungal plates have consumed their skulls, leaving them blind but granting them echolocation. They can't see you, but they can hear your heartbeat from across a room. Then there are bloaters. Years of fungal growth have turned them into walking armored nightmares who tear chunks of themselves off and throw them as explosive spore bombs. Cool. That's also a thing that happened, but the real nightmare? The Rat King. Multiple infected fused into a single organism after years of growth in enclosed environments like hospital basements. Not a group, one creature. Several bodies merged by fungal tissue into something that shouldn't exist. Genuinely one of the most disturbing enemy designs in gaming history. Here's where it gets really bleak. The fungus doesn't just thrive in the wilderness, it thrives in sewers, tunnels, basements, subway systems. Every piece of infrastructure humanity built to survive became the infection's preferred habitat. The underground networks meant to protect people turned into incubators for the thing killing them. By 2015, at least 60% of the global human population was either dead or infected, and across the entire planet, exactly one person was immune. One. Ellie's abnormal fungal growth on her brainstem essentially tricked her immune system into coexistence with the infection rather than fighting it. She's not cured. She's infected. Her body just decided to be fine with it. One girl, one biological anomaly, representing the only documented hope for the entire human species. The Last of Us works because the science is almost real. The jump from ant parasite to human parasite is terrifying, precisely because it feels like it's only one bad mutation away. But if a fungus rewriting your brain sounds bad, wait until you hear about an infection that doesn't even need you to be alive. Dead space. Every outbreak on this list so far has one thing in common. Something alive gets infected, and then it tries to kill you. Dead Space flips that entirely. The necromorphs don't infect the living, they reanimate the dead. And the way they get their raw materials is genuinely one of the most disturbing mechanisms in all of gaming. It starts with the markers. These are artifacts of extraterrestrial origin that broadcast a concentrated electromagnetic signal capable of reorganizing dead tissue at the molecular level. Any corpse within range gets converted into a hostile bioform, animated entirely by the marker's carrier wave. Not a virus, not a fungus, a signal. Cut the signal, and every necromorph in range collapses into organic sludge, which sounds like a convenient off switch until you realize the markers have a second function. They drive living people insane. The marker signal simultaneously induces homicidal and suicidal behavior in anyone nearby, essentially manufacturing the corpses it needs to build its army. More bodies means more necromorphs. More necromorphs means more death. More death means more bodies. It's a self-sustaining extinction engine disguised as an alien alien relic. But here's where it gets genuinely existential. The smarter you are, the more useful you are to it. Highly intelligent individuals don't just go crazy. They undergo something called imprinting, where the marker essentially downloads construction blueprints into their brain, compelling them to build red markers, reverse-engineered copies that spread the infection to entirely new worlds. Your greatest asset as a species, your intelligence, becomes the thing that kills you. The creatures themselves are nightmarish across the board. Slashers are the standard reanimated humans with blade arms where their forearms used to be. Infectors are dedicated conversion units that ram into fresh corpses and transform them in seconds. Twitchers move at supernatural speed. Exploders carry volatile organic sacs they launch as projectiles. Lurkers are converted from small mammals, which is, not ideal. And the marker itself creates a dead space around its immediate vicinity, forcing necromorphs into dormancy, paradoxically protecting the living people closest to it, the ones it needs to keep alive long enough to build more markers. But all of that, every single necromorph you've ever fought in those games, is just the larval stage. The adult form is a Brethren Moon, a planet-sized necromorph. When enough biomass accumulates on a world, the marker triggers a convergence event, launching every dead thing into the stratosphere where it coalesces into the biological core of a new moon. That moon then absorbs chunks of the planet itself as a protective shell before traveling through space to consume the next civilization. Dr. Serrano theorized that every living thing between the moon's point of origin and humanity's corner of the galaxy has already been systematically eaten. Every species, every world, gone, which, incidentally, is one of the most elegant answers to the Fermi paradox ever written. Why haven't we found aliens? Because something already ate them all, and it's heading this way. If you think that's the ceiling for how bad a zombie apocalypse can get, wait until you hear what the Flood did to an entire galaxy. Halo. Every outbreak on this list has a solution. Quarantine the city, burn them all, nuke Raccoon City. Centuries of human ingenuity applied to the problem of things that want to eat us, and we've always found an answer. The Flood broke that streak, because the only way to stop the Flood was to kill everything. Let me explain. The Flood is a parasitic superorganism that infects you the old-fashioned way. A small bulbous infection form latches onto your body, punches a tentacle into your spinal column, and hijacks your entire nervous system. You're still alive when this happens. Your body just doesn't belong to you anymore. Your limbs twist, your bones reshape, your flesh becomes raw material for whatever the Flood needs you to be. Within seconds, you're a combat form, a feral killing machine running on pheromone signals and pure predatory instinct. But that's just the beginning. Most parasites stop at the body. The Flood doesn't. As it accumulates biomass, consuming more hosts, it levels up, literally. Specialized pure forms emerge, defensive structures, ranged attackers. The Flood stops reacting and starts strategizing. And when enough neural tissue has been absorbed, something wakes up, the Gravemind. A singular hive intelligence built from every brain the Flood has ever consumed, every memory, every skill, every piece of knowledge from every sentient being it has ever devoured, funneled into one consciousness. The Gravemind doesn't just think. It knows everything its victims ever knew, which means it gets smarter every time it kills. And here's where it gets genuinely terrifying. The Flood doesn't just infect flesh, it infects information. The logic plague is what happens when the Flood targets an artificial intelligence. It doesn't hack the AI, it talks, it reasons. It corrupts the AI's logical framework until the machine willingly switches sides. The Forerunner AI mendicant bias, one of the most advanced artificial minds ever created, fell to the logic plague after a 43-year conversation with a Gravemind. That's not a virus. That's philosophy weaponized. In 97,445 BCE, the Forerunner Flood War reached its conclusion, and conclusion is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. The Flood had consumed most of the Forerunner population, and weaponized precursor technology capable of manipulating space itself. The most advanced civilization in galactic history threw everything they had at the parasite, and they lost. So, they fired the Halo Array, 7 ring-shaped superweapons, each one capable of annihilating all sentient life within a 25,000 light-year radius. All 7 fired simultaneously. The entire Milky Way galaxy, scoured clean. Every species, every civilization, every thinking mind, gone. Not to defeat the Flood, but to starve it. Because the only way to kill a parasite that feeds on consciousness is to eliminate all consciousness. The cure was extinction, and it still wasn't enough. Scattered Flood spores survived on the Halo installations themselves, dormant, waiting. In 2552, over 100,000 years after the galaxy was sterilized to stop them, human forces stumbled onto remnants on Installation 04. The parasite woke up. It started feeding again. And here's the detail that should keep you up at night. Every species the flood has ever consumed, all of that accumulated knowledge transfers into the grave mind. Every single time the flood returns, it doesn't start from scratch. It starts with the combined intelligence of every sentient being it has ever eaten across 100,000 years of galactic history. It remembers everything, and it is very, very patient. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.